Thank you, everybody who is on. We have a very special program today. You know, we're here in Omaha, Nebraska, but the good thing about what we do remotely now is that we have opportunities to have great speakers from around the country come in and talk to us without having to buy a plane ticket and spending a day to get here and back. So we're very excited to have a great panel of attorney helping professionals out there. And Mark Homer has been in Omaha in the past. Many of you may have remembered his 2019 presentation to our lawyer referral service CLE that we did at the end of December 2019. He is back and he has brought some amazing speakers with him. We have 90 minutes today. I am going to email everybody their CLE information by the end of the day, so you have the numbers to report. I'm going to report you by the end of tomorrow, so you have that. And this is also on demand. So if you know somebody else that would like to look at this, this will be up and available starting tomorrow when I put it online. So we're going to have everybody muted except for the speakers. There is a chat box if you have questions. We are going to have the question and answer mostly at the end of the thing, at the end of the presentation. But if you have questions on specific things, you can put them into the chat and we'll try to work that in as much as we can. The last thing I want to say, because if you're on the CLE right now, you like OBA CLE, our main CLE that you think about us for the year is the Ethics CLE, free every year, 2 hours for attorneys. That is going to be in September. On September 10th is when we're going to do it live. But like this, it'll be on demand as well for your viewing. So if you want to watch it live, September 10th is the date. Say the date on that. So that's all that I have from the OBA side. I believe I'm turning over to Kristen to kick things off.
Yes, thank you, Dave, and welcome to everyone. I know I speak on behalf of all of my fellow panelists when I say we're really excited to be here today with you for the Omaha Bar Association webinar. I'm especially excited because I am a Nebraska girl through and through. I was born in Pawnee City and grew up in Falls City and Auburn, and of course I've had many trips to Omaha, went to UNL and Lincoln Law School at University of Nebraska. So if I have any other University of Nebraska law grads out there, hello, go Big Red. And of course, I love all my Creighton friends too. So feels kind of like coming home here for this webinar in a virtual way. But enough of that, let's get this started because I know you didn't come here to hear me blubber. So today's webinar is called From Surviving to Thriving, Growth Levers for Law Firms. I am Kristen Tyler. I'm going to be your moderator today. The reason for that is the group has, I'm not sure if they nominated or forced me to be the moderator, but of the panelists, I'm the only attorney in the group. I am an attorney. I'm actively practicing. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. My practice is focused on estate planning and probate. So that's one hat that I wear. I'm an attorney. The second hat is that a few years back, I co-founded a legal tech company called Law Clerk. Maybe you've heard of it. We've been at the Nebraska Bar annual meeting a few times, but we will, of course, talk more about Law Clerk later on. But briefly, just to introduce myself before I allow my fellow panelists to introduce them, what we do at Law Clerk is we help connect busy attorneys, usually solo attorneys and smaller firms, with our nationwide network of freelance lawyers that you can hire on demand for project work, just project by project when you need help, or on a deeper level via a subscription if you need more help. So you can find us at lawclerk.legal if you want to check that out. That's my background, that I'm an attorney and a legal tech entrepreneur, and really happy to be your moderator today. Now, let's go around the group. And Amy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Amy Mann, and I'm the Director of Communications over at LawPay. And for those of you who aren't familiar, LawPay is an online payment solution developed specifically for the legal industry. We give law firms a simple, easy way to accept client payments online by credit card, debit card, ACH. And I am coming to you from in my office for the first time in like over a year from sunny Austin, Texas. So excited to be here. Can't wait to spend time with all of you. And thank you so much for having us.
That's great. Yeah, I'm in the office today too. It feels
surreal, but kind of nice. I like it.
Right? Okay. Awesome. Nefra.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nefra McDonald. I'm the Affinity Partnerships Manager at Clio. So I get to work with bar associations and law societies all across North America to be an evangelist and bring the message of Clio to all people. We also do our own webinars that we're a part of. Also was doing a lot of traveling before COVID and got to see these lovely people all the time. But it's nice to be able to be all together again in this virtual environment and be able to bring you some really great content.
Thank you, Nefra. Yeah, I do. We've done this webinar a few times, and each time I think it gets better and better. I think it's got some great content for all of you, hopefully some really practical hands-on advice. And probably the queen of practical hands-on advice is Maddie Martin. Maddie, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Maddie Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing at Smith.ai, and we are a 24/7 virtual receptionist and chat service, serving primarily solo and small firm attorneys, but all service-driven businesses. We've been around since 2015, and we do a lot more than answer calls. We handle calls, chats, text, and Facebook messages, answering, screening, scheduling, intake, and outbound calls to your web form leads, et cetera. So known for a lot of integrations and tech capacity. I spend a lot of time with the folks that you're going to be hearing from today. Mark and I were just teaching at Suffolk Law last night virtually, and here we are. I have to say that it is snowing in Buffalo today.
Oh my.
Multiple inches. So Amy, thanks for rubbing it in. We will get to spring someday.
When it's 5, you can throw it back in my face when we're cooking down here in Texas. So
yeah,
don't have AC, but yeah, I'll be sweltering this summer and suffering in a late spring. Anyway, back to you, Kristen.
Thanks, Maddie. You know, it really wouldn't be a Nebraska-based webinar if we didn't talk about the weather at least once. Like, I can't resist myself. I always have to bring that up. So last but not least is our good friend, Mark Homer. Mark, what's the weather like in your neck of the woods?
I woke up with snow as well this morning. I know Cincinnati, like we're not even like, we're pretty far south in Ohio here. Maddie and I were teaching this class last night, and the temperature when we started was 68 degrees, and it was 38 degrees an hour and a half later. That's insane to me. It's crazy. But anyway, we're here, and I'm in the office as well. So I'm Mark Homer. I'm the author of Online Law Practice Strategies and founder of Get Noticed, Get Found, a marketing agency for law firms. And so I think I'll be handling the marketing side hopefully a lot today. But yeah, like this is a great group, and was out there like in end of 2019 with Dave, and I reached out and said, hey man, I've got this power panel that I'd love to bring to the bar. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, we love questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and as they come to you, drop them in the chat or the question section of the Zoom. We're planning to keep them to the end of the program, but if there's some that are super timely, we may grab them along the way, but don't be shy. Go ahead and drop those questions as they come up. Second off, we do have a great handout of materials with some really information-packed slides. I believe that Maddie put a link for those in the chat. So if you haven't located that, you might want to go find that link and maybe open it in another window on your screen, or if you want to print it out quick, whatever, but we'll make reference to some of those slides along the way. And it's a great resource for you to keep to reflect back on. And it does also include our contact information. So if you have any specific questions for any one of us, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help and be a resource for you. Okay, let's kick it off. We're going to start out on the marketing track. So Mark, you know, we are coming out of a really trying year for a lot of attorneys and a lot of law firms. But one thing that you've mentioned to me over the past year is that, you know, in tough times is really when marketing becomes critical for law firms. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we get the question a lot, you know, is my marketing really doing anything? Like we recommend usually, you know, law firms spend between 7 to 10% of revenues on marketing. And so that can be a lot of money, right? And when everything's going well and, you know, like the rising tide is lifting all boats, it does, you know, kind of like, why, you know, like instead of spending $70,000, I could be putting that in my pocket, right? I mean, I'm a business owner, I get it, right? Like that's an operating expense that would be nice to have in my pocket. But we saw last year, because it was a really, really tough year, And I'll reference some stuff that Nefer might talk about later. But Clio did this legal trends report where they showed across all these law firms and like from whether they were Clio users or not, they had all this data about what happened to revenues and matters and stuff between the beginning of 2020 where things were actually up and looking good, and then suddenly by the end of the second quarter of 2020, you had people down and like almost to the point where by the end of 2020, like some people didn't even recover to get back to where they were in 2019 revenues. So we took that data and said, well, we work with a lot of clients. We have a lot of law firms that do marketing with us. So we looked and said, if anybody was doing marketing and they were spending at least $12,000 a year with us for over a few years, how did they fare in 2020? And it was interesting to see that while they did drop, and there's a couple of handouts with some charts there. I think it's like page 3 or 4. But while they did drop in the second quarter, they still maintained numbers that were better than 2019. So we, like essentially the people who were marketing, while there was less business out there, the people who were getting it were probably the ones who were out there the most, who were ranking the best on Google or doing the paid advertising, or like had a good presence online. They were actually getting some of the cases that were out there and not struggling as much. So it really not great that we were able to get this data because it was bad times, but it was interesting. In legal, we specifically were able to show law firms that were marketing did much better than the average law firm.
Well, that's good to hear that was successful even during trying times. And for all of you who are, staying committed to your marketing campaigns, kudos to you. And for those of you who maybe have been holding back, maybe it's a time to reengage. But another really great thing about Mark and his team is that they are data junkies. And so, Mark, I'm sure that you've gathered a lot of data over the last year, some of which you've already shared. But I'm sure there's probably some lessons to learn about marketing opportunities from that data. What are you and your team doing to help lawyers and law firms take advantage of these lessons?
Yeah, so we try this every year, but this was a very unusual year where we were diving a little bit maybe more into the data than usual. But we kind of like what we consider 3 trends for this year that we're using with our clients and adjusting kind of the way we market it and some of the things that worked last year that we're carrying forward. And you talk about those growth levers to thrive, right? So like what kept people alive, but like what are we now taking advantage of for the 2021 and beyond? The first kind of trend was that people are the way people are finding like law firm websites or law firms in general is much more fragmented than it was even just a few years ago, right? So we know that that's been a trend that it's not just people having a website and going www. whatever. I mean, do you remember the days of actually typing in a URL? I mean, it's been so long since we've done that, but now they're finding us via social media. Like we had some data that showed in that second quarter when everybody was locked down and it was crazy, we knew that Facebook had like record numbers. I mean, the data on it in the industry was amazing. We actually saw social media visits to websites almost double. So it wasn't like just people were spending more time online, but they actually ended up, some of those visited websites from, Facebook was a lot of that traffic as well. So Facebook and other social media channels were driving a lot of traffic to some law firms in the second quarter. And that actually ended the year better than 2019 as well. So it did dip down a little bit because as I think general traffic came back from other means, but it's still, social media was like, 4 or 5% higher than it was in 2019. So, between social media, email marketing, all these different ways people are finding law firms. Google My Business is a critical thing. Our recommendation based on that is, it's not the best recommendation because it's more work, unfortunately, but you do have to be thinking multi-channel or omni-channel is another term that Maddie and I will throw around a lot. But like this idea that you have to have your presence in multiple places for people to ultimately get to your website, because people are searching in different ways. People are coming at things in the way that they're journey is, right? Not the way that you want them to be. So whether that's paid ads, email marketing is something I highly recommend. Email marketing and drip marketing and stuff, because that's an audience that you get to control over time, right? Like you get to kind of control that message, which is great. And a lot of people don't take advantage of that. You've got a lot of clients, you have all these emails, capture that, do email marketing, but also posting on social media, doing some video work, all these things. Find the area that you like, what content area can you excel at, and then find ways to leverage and repurpose that content over other channels, for lack of a better term. So that's like one of the key trends that we've been seeing, and we got a couple more. The other one is that, and I think Amy and Nefra and Maddie will probably talk to this one a lot, but like just the digital services in general. We see that people are expecting, like law firms or just businesses in general, right? Like to have a digital way of accessing them. And we saw a massive shift for a lot of law firms being forced to, suddenly have, cloud-based tools and document management and maybe e-signatures and Zoom meetings and stuff for the first time, and adopting all this technology, payments, electronic payments. Amy will talk about some of this, right? So my recommendation is, if this is what consumers are expecting, right? We know, and I've got a lot of slides from data from like McKinsey, from Duke, from American Marketing Association in there, right? Like there's a lot of data that shows that this is a trend that we know is happening at the Fortune 500 levels, let alone local businesses. If that's what consumers are expecting, then let's tell them that you do that. So if you suddenly added Zoom meetings and you added the ability to have a client portal or document management or electronic payment, right? Like you take credit cards. Put that on your homepage or talk about this, right? Like there's a benefit to, let's say like only half people are taking electronic payments. I bet even a smaller amount are advertising that, hey, I'm easy to work with because I work with you the way you want to be worked with. Like I have a client portal, I can do Zoom meetings, I can take a credit card. So advertise and brag about that, because nobody's doing it. So we're putting that on our homepage for our clients, and when consumers get there, they're like, oh, that person's working the way that I want to work with a law firm. So that's the second trend. And then the final trend is essentially the power of Google. It just continues to grow. And that to the point where we look at like referral information. People are like, I get a lot of business from referrals. Well, Google search, just search in general, is like half of the people are finding law firms from search. We know that Google is a significant part of that. So if you look at how much traffic goes to a law firm from Google, it's probably your best referral partner, right? Like, so Google's essentially your referral partner now, right? And so if you start thinking about it like that and saying, how do I take advantage and grow this awesome referral partner, right? Getting that Google My Business. We have get the Google My Business, the maps. If you take nothing else away from this and you haven't done your Google My Business, spend a lot of time on that. Maddie, you have a great presentation. You probably should throw that in the chat. Like you guys did a webinar, it was great. But so Google My Business, we have a client that gets over half of their calls from their Google My Business profile on search. Like they're not even making it to their website. They're, so Google is this, search engine optimization, Google My Business, taking advantage of digital strategies for this referral base that isn't people asking a friend or colleague. They're just searching on their own. But we know most of them are ending at Google. So those are kind of like the three general trends and what we're doing with our clients. Like we're focusing on search pretty heavy right now, but we are trying to figure out how to take content and put it in lots of channels as well.
That's great. So some of the takeaways I've gathered from your comments here, Mark, are number one of the most actionable things you can do if you are an action-oriented person is to make sure that your Google My Business is set up if you haven't already done that. The second thing that Mark was covering was the fact that now more than ever, it's important to make some changes in your practice to accommodate your clients' needs, such as virtual meetings, and then to let them know about it, add it to your website or add that into your social media marketing. Now, Mark, one question that came in that I think we could go ahead and address, because we have plenty of time, is what about marketing that you do Zoom meetings instead of the Google stuff? Like, how would you market that you're able to use Zoom to meet with clients and conduct business?
Yeah, I mean, I would put that right on your homepage. I mean, first of all, if you have Calendly built in, so somebody doesn't even have to call somebody, And they can,
Can
you know,
you
like
explain Calendly for anybody who may be
yeah. So Calendly or any kind of there's Acuity, there's a whole bunch of them, but they're like, you know, the ability to somebody schedule on your calendar. So you can say like, you know, these are hours I'm available for a consultation, and you can kind of block those hours off, and then somebody can come into your website. They answer some questions on a form that you have, and if they're kind of a good lead, they can go into an ability to schedule right there, and then they can create a Zoom meeting. And so you don't even have to answer the phone to create that Zoom meeting, right? But you advertise that, yes, you don't have to come down to our office. You don't have to park. You don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff, finding parking, paying for parking. And we can just do this, you know, from your couch. Or if let's say you're doing maybe a estate plan and you've got, you know, a husband and a wife, and one's at the office and one's at home, you can, like, they don't have to like rearrange their time for you. You can actually highlight that benefit. And I would put that on, you know, in your homepage, or talking about how it is to work with you. Like, we are so convenient to work with. Here's an example. And you give that like horrible example of like, oh yeah, I can imagine my wife and I getting us in the same room is so hard during the day. You know, she works like crazy. I work like crazy. So like, you know, and somebody can relate to that and go, that's the kind of law firm I want to work with. So I would definitely highlight that you do Zoom meetings.
Absolutely. I want to go back to one other thing you were talking about the importance of repurposing content. And just if anyone's not familiar with that, can you give us some examples of, you know, if you have an attorney who has a great blog on their website and they've routinely updated it with new blogs, what else could they do with that blog content to try to connect with other potential customers?
Right. Yeah. So it's a good question, because I talked about search engine optimization as well. This plays well. You know, like, content is a great thing for search. It's a great thing for social media. It's just a good foundational component for marketing, especially marketing like a business service. And you know, like legal profession, education-based marketing is great. So if you have a blog, for example, that you gave, you could take pieces of that blog, and that could be social media posts that point back to that blog, right? So you could take that and schedule that throughout the month. And now you're hitting some social media channels. You could take that concept and create a really cool image or infographic. Smith AI does like a great job at like creating these infographics of like all their content all the time, or they get presenters to speak, and then they take that and create an infographic and then send it back. And then people like me go, that's an awesome summary of what I did. Now let me share that with my audience, right? And then, so like creating like a little infographic that you put out on Instagram or something. These are things you don't have to do, right? You can actually outsource some of that work very easy, very simply, Upwork and that kind of stuff. So if you've already done the work on the content, you can kind of pay somebody else to kind of take it into these, you know, create these snippets for social media. People have even done like creating like slideshows, like kind of graphical slideshows with some of the content and some of the points. So if you had that infographic, think of a way you could kind of turn that into a visual for like, you know, 90 seconds or so or more, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And that's now on the YouTube channel, right? You're hitting some video that way. The one way I always like usually recommend for a lot of law firms when it comes to repurposing content is usually starting with video, because that's where people are often very comfortable. If you're sitting across from a client and answering questions, or a prospect all the time, or you're on the phone answering questions all the time, you're comfortable talking. So instead of looking at that blank white piece of paper and saying, what blog do I write? You know, like, just think about some questions, and you can even have somebody ask you the question and you answer them. They just happen to be right behind the video camera. And then you can take that content, turn that into a blog, turn that into an article, take a snippet of that, make that part of your social media. So video is a great place to start if you haven't been doing something. But if you have, yeah, I mean, like a blog example, repurpose that as much as possible. And the one thing I would wrap up on that is also send out an e-newsletter pointing to that content that you just added, right? Hey, we just created this video and we have this article that supports it. And did you see our new infographic, right? Like, that's 3 content pieces in an e-newsletter. You just covered a whole month's worth of content.
That's, I mean, really great practical advice. And I would just add to it that, you know, if you are intimidated by videos, or you're not sure how to get started with that, you have a great tool right here. I'm guessing you probably have one of these in your hand. If you do, you should put it down away from you to listen to us. But, you know, you really can get really high quality video content to post on social media from your cell phone these days. It's not hard. So give it a try. You might be really surprised with the results. So it's clear that Mark and his team are just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to all things marketing for law firms. So Mark, if someone wanted to learn more about these marketing topics, your services, what do you have to share?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two ways that I would say right now. We during COVID we took our book and PDF'd it. So we have like a 300-page book. You can go to Amazon, pay $50 for it, or I think Dave, anybody who came to the last session had a free version. So, but we've got it PDF'd now, and you can grab a copy of that for free. It's gnjf.com/thrive, and it's in the handouts there as well. And by the way, if you want to understand like a really good way to capture information and then do a nice follow-up marketing campaign, you want to see an expert example at that, you're going to put your information in and we're going to send you some emails. But I recommend not just reading the emails, but seeing like what I was doing. Oh, look, that second email is a testimonial. That's probably a good thing to throw in there. That third email is like an extra education piece. These are good drip campaign, so learn from, somebody who's doing it. So you are going to get some emails from me, but I recommend learning from it. And the other place is gnjf.tv. We have a video series that we do where we interview a number of people as well as have a lot of tip videos up there for marketing ideas.
Thank you so much, Mark. And also, I'll just mention, if you don't follow Mark's company, GNGF, on social media, give him a follow because you'll get a lot of other really creative ideas there as well. So thank you, Mark. Oh, I thought my camera went out for a second. It looks like it's fine now. Sorry. Okay, moving on. So we've covered some marketing strategies that you can use as you're, hopefully transitioning from just surviving this pandemic to emerging from it and thriving. And so in my mind, the next natural progression in the conversation from marketing, from trying to find those new clients and connect with them is, well, how do you get them in the door? Intake. How do you communicate with them? And that's where Maddie Martin can help us with some really practical advice. So Maddie, welcome. Thank you again for joining us. And, it's no secret that this pandemic has caused a lot of disruptions for everyone, attorneys and law firms included. I would be curious to hear, what are some of the ways you've seen attorneys successfully mitigate some of the, impact of these disruptions when it comes to working with our clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kristen. Thank you. I mean, I think that the disruptions come from all angles, and they are not just, among the clients and the attorney relationship, but also just personally, right? I mean, there are disruptions that you as a professional, as a parent, as a homeowner, as someone who's in their community, you're dealing with. Everything takes longer. It's still taking longer, even though last year was sort of the brunt of it. Everything from, just getting groceries to childcare to education for the kids, those services all take longer, and that draws down on your time that's available for work. And then there is your client's experience with that as well, right? So it's not only disruptive on the client side, but it's also disruptive on your side. And as a result, there was a huge rush to set up some of the systems that Mark mentioned. And what ends up happening when there is this hurry there is that those systems sometimes are not set up in the most ideal way. So right now, if we're thinking about how to go from surviving to thriving, really the topic at hand today, it's checking out those systems that you initially set up and seeing how they can work for you or work better, or if you need to switch to something else. So there is a bit of an audit mindset happening right now. And looking at those disruptions, the immediate recovery, whether that's your phone system being forwarded to your cell phone or your home phone or to someone else's home phone who works for you, or to a receptionist service, obviously, or setting up your online calendar, setting up software to manage the cases and your projects and your business, your billing, et cetera. When you hurry to get those things set up, oftentimes the workflows are not optimized and there's still a lot of moving parts, and it can feel even like you're worse off than you were before because you have so much more on your plate that's brand new. So what I would recommend is, going back and looking at your initial solutions to those disruptions when it comes especially to your communication systems, and doing a check on every system. Is your calendaring working the way that you want it to? When you call your business phone number, let's say from your home phone, how many times does it ring? Do you connect with your office the way that you expect to, because that's your leads experience? So it's really critical that those disruptions are not just taken care of, but that they're optimized, because right now we've sort of caught our breath and we want to make sure that the right systems are in place correctly and not just the Band-Aid that everyone was forced to immediately put on. And a great example of that is if you're finding that you're getting too many consultations, you don't have the screening in place that you once did, and you put your calendar link on your website and you're like, Mark told me to do that. That's a great opportunity to say, like, are you screening properly? You can do this. You don't have to say online calendaring doesn't work for me, which we're seeing now, like sort of the offshoot of these disruptions and recovery. And the conclusion that's being drawn is often not necessarily accurate. And what I mean is, online calendaring is not the problem in this case. It's that you're not asking questions before giving the permission to schedule time, or you're not asking for payment before giving the permission to schedule time. So look at that front line, as we like to say. Where are those marketing leads coming in from? Where are the referrals coming in from? First, does everyone have the same experience? Because your disruptions, you may have said, I'm getting my phone system in order because that's where I identify the vast majority of losses could occur. Most of my inbound leads are phone calls, right? But if you didn't go back and look at how many Facebook messages you get, is your phone system text enabled? Do you have website chat? Where are the form fills coming on your website? Make sure that you're also accounting for every single channel and that the experience for them is the same, because someone who simply prefers to contact you on Facebook doesn't deserve any less of an experience as the person who contacts you by phone. And that's very often the case.
Maddie, you, always have such great ideas. And one thing I like to highlight is when you, I know that sometimes trying out a new tool can be a little intimidating. And one of the best things about working with someone who is an outsourced resource like Maddie and her team of virtual receptionists is they're a lot more than receptionists. And also they work with a bunch of lawyers all over the country. They see how other lawyers are doing things and succeeding. They, day in and day out are working with some of these tools, and they can help coach you and teach you and answer questions that you may have about all of these different calendaring and payment systems and all those things. So they really can be a tremendous partner to work with, much more than just answering the phone. So I think that's really great. Now, another obvious trend that's been happening is that people, consumers, businesses, everyone have really changed their behaviors in response to everything that's happened from the pandemic. A lot of our day-to-day behaviors are different now than they were a year ago. Maddie, what are some of those changes, the behavioral changes that attorneys should be mindful of when trying to attract new clients and work with new clients?
I don't know if we thought it was possible for people to expect a faster response than we already were sensing back in, 2015, 2016, 2017, the height of Uber adoption and Amazon Prime and, Instacart, all the sort of like instant delivery, give it to me now sort of mindset. It's here to stay and it's doubling down, right? So I think that pandemic related sort of instance here is it's 24/7, and it's also taking into account the close quarters that people are in. So, all those things of the passive instant responsiveness didn't really matter like where you are. It's going to come to you no matter what. But now it's sort of a factor of, where is that person and how do we need to accommodate that situation? And what I mean is there are a few key tools that you would want to use to make sure that you are sort of getting rid of the noise around you when you're in close quarters in your home. There's childcare, homeschooling, two adults working, on separate floors or in next door bedrooms or whatever the case may be. There are a few tools that we really recommend strongly. So as a receptionist service, one of the things that we recommend, and this isn't in the slide deck, but I'm mentioning it right now because it's top of mind, is CRISP. So that's KRISP.ai. It will drown out noise during your Zoom calls, your Zoom trials, places where you need to be professional and not having a screaming kid in the background or a barking dog, TV, you name it. That is a way to maintain your professional presence and also on a consultation. Now, we already talked about the calendaring systems, but outwardly on your website, you want to make sure that also you are offering discrete channels to communicate. I mentioned text and Facebook, but website chat is really critical because people who have legal issues, who are at home with an elderly parent or a spouse from whom they want a divorce, you can imagine they're not going to have a phone call and be overheard talking to an attorney, quite uncomfortable, maybe even dangerous for them. So the chat is really an opportunity to have a discrete conversation on a sensitive matter silently. And it is also a way to, in writing, we were talking about multi-purpose marketing, get the exact words that your leads are using and then using that back in your content, because the more that you speak their language, the more successful you'll be in outwardly presenting that to them in your marketing materials. So I would encourage you to make sure that you're exploring every available channel and 24/7. And this is something that you can also present outwardly on your Google My Business profile, on your Facebook page, everywhere leads are going to reach you. Are you on marketplaces? Are you on directory sites? Anywhere you have an online presence, you want to make sure that you reflect the level of responsiveness and the services that you offer. One of the services, and the Clear report, I don't know, Nefer can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if they say this directly, but it is a service, and Mark sort of got to this when he's talking about taking online payments and calendaring tools and what you put on your website. It is a service to be responsive. Most of the sentiment that the client feels, that sense of relief, that sense of being taken care of urgently, with a strong sense that their legal matter is urgent, even if you may know that it's not, that is remedied by you outwardly saying that you are going to be responsive and you are responsive. So think about, yes, we think about practice areas and different services within them. It is a service within itself, overarching as an umbrella, everything else that you do to be responsive. That unlocks that business growth for you. So if you can do that in a professional way, that is quiet, that is uninterrupted, that has a workflow of someone professionally and friendly answering your calls and chats and texts, so you're not getting the interruptions on all these channels you're opening up, but then presenting yourself as available for scheduling, you actually can position your firm above and beyond the competition as responsive, but also as adhering to a workflow that they can depend on, which is really critical right now with so much changing in the world.
Responsiveness is definitely key. And that can be a challenge when you're juggling a lot of things on any given day. A couple of things you mentioned, Maddie, having attorneys communicate with clients or potential clients by text message, through social media, direct messenger, through a chat service on their website. Those are still kind of new things. What have you seen in terms of growth with using those tools in legal, but even maybe in not legal? Because I know you work with other industries as well.
There's, massive adoption. And I will say this, a lot of the friction in the adoption is believing that you have to learn and build everything yourself. So often what we see is very upfront analysis paralysis, or the sense that you have to DIY. There's a lot of learning that is accumulated, but not necessarily applicable to your career growth and to your passions, right? So I would just implore that everyone, if you are looking at these solutions, and it might be a CRM or intake system, it might be case management, it might be calendaring, it might be a chatbot or text answering, or different tools that automate responses like Text Expander, which allow you with a couple clicks of a button to get a whole paragraph of text out to someone easily. Those are tools that there are some things to implement, there are some things to learn, and there are some things to have someone else do for you, right? And when it comes to implementing a new case management system, when it comes to implementing chat, the biggest trend that we have seen in the last few years is a few years ago, everyone was building their own custom chatbots. They were spending tens of thousands of dollars on these custom chatbots, only to realize at the end of the day that for a low monthly subscription in the hundreds of dollars, it was plug and play, right? With a team behind that software that would actually do it for you and customize it. And I think that's sort of the awakening moment, that a lot of people are still spending their limited time on the wrong things, thinking that each new channel deserves so much individualized time and attention and customization. That's not necessarily a knowledge base that you yourself need to build. So as you're looking at new projects, is that something that's going to benefit you to know in the long run? Or is it something that you need to implement and test and make sure that it works and not necessarily become an expert in, right? And that's really a big part of the technology conversation we're having in legal right now.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So you obviously have a front row view to what a lot of successful attorneys are doing out there across the country in different areas. In terms of law firm communications, what are some things you're seeing that could be easily replicated by other firms without a big learning curve?
Well, perfect. I think that online calendaring is super plug and play. It is something that you should have not only on your website, but also in your email signature, everywhere you have a presence online. The links are very embeddable. It's easy to include that everywhere you sort of exist. And again, text expander is your friend. You don't want to be typing the same message of paragraphs on social media all the time when you get a new referral or lead. We also find that, people are moving away from, again, that plug and play. Oh my gosh, I need a phone system now at home that works with my phone number. I'm going to Google Voice. Please no, right? Like the latency and the issues and the lack of customer support, especially for solo and small firms, is really poor quality when you go with a solution that is not meant to operate a business on. So on slide 30 of the deck that we shared, there's a really great article from Corvum, which is a VoIP solution that actually integrates with Clio. And he goes through in very sort of educated but simple terms what you need to look for in a voice solution that will work wherever you are. And I think it's critical that people understand that it's the most important channel for your business, probably. The other thing is the online forms. Make sure that you're taking advantage of your intake form, that any sort of marketing lead gen forms are connected to your CRM for those workflows and follow-up. You may find that it's easier than you think to get those things going, and more solutions are connecting as like chains in this program. So you can customize your software stack, so to speak, use whatever systems you want as long as they talk to the next system in line or the system before them. And Clio is a great example of this. If you haven't looked at their marketplace, this is really the number one thing I recommend to anyone looking at technology. Does it play well with others? Because you're not necessarily going to stay with what you have now. The decision should be based on, will it work with what I have now and what I might add in the future? Because that's less friction and allows you to sort of grow and flex as your firm needs. The last thing that I'll say is when it comes to adopting technologies that are not legal specific, chat comes to mind here. You also need to consider what is the implication of using this at a law firm versus a car repair shop, right? The car repair shop doesn't have to have, well, this is maybe a bad example. The landscaper, I'm trying to think of an example that doesn't have liability, and all the attorneys here are going to laugh at me. But let's say that there's chat and you want to make sure that it's clear that it is not establishing an attorney-client relationship and that it does not constitute legal advice, the content within that chat. You might also say, as some of our clients do, you're talking to a receptionist for our firm or a chat bot, this is not an attorney, don't expect legal advice. However much you hammer them with that disclaimer is your discretion. But on slide 36, I give an example of that. And I would just encourage you that you need to interpret the use of the technology you apply, whether it's the online forms on slide 31 and 32, or the chat on slide 36, or your intake form. What do you need to capture and what do you need to put out there as a law firm, not as a landscaper or a plumber or car repair, which might have their own disclaimers, but yours are different. So that's your expertise that you need to apply in that scenario.
All right, I do have one more question for you, but a really timely question came through on the chat, so I want to tee that up for you. This is from Lily. Great question, Lily. So she says that a lot of her clients will call and say that they texted her, but she has a landline. Any suggestions for how to handle that situation so that, you know, clients don't think they texted her when they really texted like nobody?
Yeah, I would port that number to VoIP, and I would then have your landline be assigned a different number that actually can be in the sort of phone system. So when that VoIP number, which is ported, will be text enabled, then those will not be missed. They could be answered by Smith AI or you or someone on your team. And then your landline, if you prefer that phone to be that physical hard phone, then you can have a different number attached to that. There are plenty of hard phones, we call them, versus soft phones, which might be on your desktop, that you can assign a number to and answer that if you prefer that format for your calls.
That's good. So there are some tools to help get those text messages to come in even to a landline.
You can get the text messages, definitely, and we'd be happy to help you through that.
All right, last question for you, Maddie, before we move on is, what would be your advice for someone who might be new to outsourcing to a virtual receptionist service? You know, what are considerations or precautions that they should be careful about?
So I would say a few things. Make sure that you understand what your expectations are and don't be self-limiting. You know, we have a lot of people who will contact Smith AI and say, I understand that, you know, you're going to answer my calls. It sounds expensive, you know, $5 to $7 a call for just like answering and taking a message. It's like, well, no, not really. You know, there is complex sort of instructions that are baked in there, call transfers, when and for whom and for what leads or clients or court staff, et cetera, referral partners, your mother, you know, we need to account for these things. And then there's the integration that's free, and there's the scheduling and intake and payments that we use, obviously, many times LawPay invoices for, and the intake forms that are completed. So you start to understand the complexity. I would encourage that you ask, what is sort of the whole world that I have available to me, and share your goals. So, you know, I was just saying this earlier today with Nalini at Blue Shark Digital, who Mark knows, you know, well-respected other peer of ours. And, you know, we were talking about the importance of upfront getting clear on what your goals are and why you're having this conversation. I'm sure that this plays into the conversations that Nefra and Amy and Mark and, you know, Kristen, you all have. You have this conversation with your clients too, as attorneys. What are your goals here? Why are you getting a divorce or child custody or an estate plan set up this way, et cetera, et cetera? If we ask what the goals are, if you're not asked, you should share. But if we ask what the goals are, is it to reduce interruptions? Is it to capture more of the leads and never miss a call? Is it to increase productivity and streamline your systems? Is it to work less and have more time for other things or pursuits? Is it to get your system so set up and automated that you can hand off and sell your firm? There are so many different components here that those are the questions we want to ask up front to understand, all right, if your goal is to never miss a call, then you should be forwarding all calls to us, not just overflow, right? There are different sort of setups that you would have. And one of them is, I'm going to try and answer the call. And if I don't get to it, then Smith AI will be my backup. But if you never want to miss a call and you add a few rings into that system, then you're going to have people who drop off after a few rings, and you're going to shoot yourself in the foot to achieving those goals. So I think it's really important that you're upfront and that you share as much as you're comfortable with about the goals of your firm, so that your solution provider, like Smith AI or anyone for that matter, can align to them, because they know what they can do for you, and let them share that because they know their service is better than you. Let them match their services to your goals. That's my number one recommendation. And to trying things that, even if you may not like it yourself, the data shows that it works, like chat. You might think that chat bots are the most annoying thing, but Mark has fantastic data on how effective they are in capturing net new leads who wouldn't otherwise call or fill a form. And it really surprised, I think, a lot of his clients. We see it every day. I don't like this technology personally, but my clients seem to confront your assumptions, and you may be pleasantly surprised at the revenue that comes through to you.
That is great. And Dave, thank you for the comment you put in the chat as well with the suggestion. That's really helpful. So Maddie, I mean, I think definitely being clear on your own expectations, sharing your goals so that you aren't expecting people to read your mind. That's key to getting the results you're looking for. Thank you so much. For anyone who maybe has more questions about this area of intake and help with communications, check out Smith AI on social media, their website. And again, Maddie's contact information is at the end of the slides we provided you if you want to get in touch with her directly. So now that we've talked about marketing, we've talked about getting clients in the door and connecting with them. Next up, we need to talk about how you're going to manage, how you're going to survive and thrive when you are running a busy law firm that's growing with a lot of clients. And for a lot of us attorneys, that means implementing a practice management software. Full disclosure, my firm has used Clio for 6 years. We are big fans. And I'm very happy that we have Nefra here with us today from Clio to help talk about her perspective on what law firms can do to continue to grow and see a lot of success in the months and years ahead. So Nefra, every year your team puts out an amazing legal trends report. The 2020 report is available on their website. If you haven't read Clio's legal trends report, definitely encourage you to check it out. But that report has a lot of data about how law firms got through the pandemic. Can you tell us how that research was done, how it was gathered, and what were a few of the really key findings?
Sure, thanks, Kristen. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Legal Trends Report, we do this annually, and we put out our 6th report this year, which is pretty crazy. And then we have, because of this longevity in this study, we have the first ever longitudinal study of the legal industry with insights that we build off of year over year. And for the last 5 years, we focused on how lawyers spend their time. We focused on legal consumer trends. And most recently, we focused on the factors that influence a law firm's success and impact that 1% wins or 1% gains, those small changes can make on a firm's success over time. And so where we get our data from is through a couple of different areas. We use anonymized and aggregated data from the Clio application that's contributed by over 70,000 law firms. We don't see any of the client files or metadata or anything like that. Participation is completely optional, but we are able to see a lot in terms of trends by analyzing this data. We also do law firm surveys. So we had multiple surveys last year with over 1,000 responses containing those qualitative and quantitative results from practicing legal professionals that we were able to distill into this report. We also did a general population survey. So we surveyed members of the public who sought legal advice and asked them about factors and what happened when they didn't hire a lawyer, or what their hesitation was. Just getting their sentiments over the last year as well, because it was a strange time for consumers too. And I think most law firms understand that consumer sentiment has also changed, as well as their financial situation. So We also did a lot of research last year, again, to just measure the changes that were happening throughout the pandemic. And Mark mentioned this, that his team also did some corresponding research on that dip that we showed, that initial dip of law firms not getting any new business and calls drying up and things like that.
Yeah, that weird time period of what the heck is going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we have all of that data available on Clio.com as well. If you want to take a look at how some of those trends unfolded by practice area, by state, and comparing that to the number of cases that were happening at that time. So we have a lot of that data available for you. And we really wanted to see what else was happening during those times that were contributing to this. We also looked at it from a solo firm versus a firm with multiple lawyers. And that report was released earlier this year to give people just another glimpse into this data. So there's a ton of data available to you, and it can be really applicable to your specific practice area. So one of the things that I wanted to point out first that was a really big finding from this study is that law firms who were using multiple technologies to service their clients saw a higher per attorney revenue collected when they were using these technologies compared to law firms that were not using these technologies. And I'll talk more about what those technologies are in a moment. But the other thing that I wanted to point out here is that there was a lot of concerns about being able to continue through the pandemic and survive the other side, right? So a lot of people, 66% of the attorneys we surveyed were concerned about the success of their practice. 47% were concerned with making a living, and 72% were concerned that clients would not be able to pay them. So on the consumer side, clients were starting to come to terms with their own financial situation. And early on in the pandemic, they weren't necessarily willing to hire an attorney for the legal problems that they had that could be solved by an attorney. Now we're looking at a changed consumer where they are more tech savvy than ever. 58% of consumers say that technology is more important to them now than it was before the pandemic. So if you had anyone that was hesitating to use technology that you were offering, that hesitation is pretty gone. 52% of consumers say they use more technology. More than half of consumers are comfortable with technology. And 56% would like to video conference with you versus a phone call. And as far as electronic payments goes, Amy will get into this a little bit more, but 65% of consumers prefer paying for legal technology services electronically or paying for legal services electronically. So that's a little bit of the data that we got there. And I mean, there's so much more in terms of, their preference for document sharing electronically, all of that good stuff.
All of that good stuff. One of the things in the report that really stuck out to me, Nefra, was, the report highlighted that lawyers who were already using different technology tools made significantly more revenue through the pandemic than their peers who weren't. What were some of those key technologies they were using, and why are they important?
Yeah, so for these law firms that were using multiple technologies, the three technologies that really made a difference in per attorney revenue was a client intake and CRM, legal specific CRM, online payments, and client portals. So can
you talk us through those a little bit? Maybe some, nitty gritty examples for people who maybe aren't familiar with some of those tools?
Yeah, so a client intake and CRM tool will kind of automate that process for you. So when the pandemic hit, were you still relying on paper forms for clients to fill out? Were you sending them PDFs where they had to write something down and then scan it and send it back to you? There are solutions out there. Clio Grow is one of them, where you can have your intake forms on sort of a web page. The client goes to that web page, they can give you all of the necessary information, they can even upload documents onto this, and that gets turned into a PDF that you or your staff can review. The other thing that happens when you're using Clio Grow for this kind of exchange is that those fields that the client's filling out, so the things like name and email address and social security and date of birth and all those things that you would typically put into documents later, they become custom fields that you can use for document automation and email automation within the platform. So that's going to be something that saves you time long term. And so when we're thinking about that per attorney revenue, that means that the lawyers that we're using, or the law firms that we're using intake and CRM software to manage that life cycle in the beginning of somebody hiring you, they had a lot less time being spent there because so much of it was automated. And then to transition that client into a paying client and be able to start generating documents and correspondence right away was so much faster for them because of being able to use those technologies.
Definitely. Well, Nefer, I know that in the before times you went to as many, if not more, legal conferences than even I have been to the past few years. So you've seen a lot of the tools that are out there. You know, Clio itself has a ton of great features. Like I said, my firm uses it. Aside from some of the features and tools you've mentioned already, what are some other tech tools that law firms should take a look at to see if they might help them thrive in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, so I know Mark mentioned earlier that finding a law firm is now omni-channel, and Clio can definitely help with those. Again, he also mentioned that Google is like a superpower that you need to have. So Clio does have an integration with Google My Business that makes it a lot easier for you to update and verify your profile and to claim it. So if you're a Clio user, we help you with that as well. I would definitely recommend using a Zoom integration. So we're on Zoom right now. It's, again, video conferencing is something that clients expect in this new world. And so having that integrated into whatever you're using for calendaring, for Clio, in Clio, for example, we have a built-in scheduler where you can also set up paid consultations as a part of your workflow, and then be able to check a box to add a Zoom link to that meeting. So all of these things, like as you're adding these technologies, thinking about, like Maddie said, how does this flow? How does this work? And if that sort of flow is broken, then that means you've got a piece of technology that either you're not using to its fullest potential, or there might be a process broken somewhere, or maybe it's just not the right fit, right? So thinking about those things. For law firms who still get a lot of paper in, there are a couple of solutions there. So there's things like Earth Class Mail, where you can have your mail scanned in, so people all have access to the same documents, even if you aren't in the same place at the same time. So as we do this return to work, there may be a situation where there's some of the office that is going to continue to work remotely or work remotely a couple of days a week. Having all of your documents and your correspondence in a digital format and being stored in your practice management system gives people a centralized place to look for all of their documents. If you're collecting your mail physically in the office and you don't want to use a service, having something like Fujitsu ScanSnap, they're very inexpensive, under $500 scanners that make it really easy to get documents where you need them. They also have integrations with things like OneDrive, with Google Drive, with Clio's documents. So you can scan those documents and get them directly where they need to be, depending on how you're organizing and storing your files. Maddie mentioned a voice over IP provider. I think that that's really critical. Clio has a lot of integrations with several of them, and the calls get recorded and the length of time you're spending on those gets recorded. So it's just a matter of clicking a button and adding the time to it. So that gets added to the client's bill. Business text is another one. Those correspondences can also be logged in your practice management software. So you've got this like centralized place where all of the conversations are being recorded. And if you ever get into a situation where a client complains to the bar, for example, and says that you haven't been responsive, well, you've got a communications log that you can send and immediately just squash that whole thing, right? So all of these things are really good. As far as internal communications go and collaboration, Clio has an integration with Microsoft Teams. It's nice to be able to alleviate some of the email back and forth between internal parties. but also it's nice to have that correspondence regarding specific matters tied back to that matter. So if you're having a conversation about a particular case through email, it's really difficult to track that versus if you set up a team and relate that back to a matter in Clio, all of the chit chat back and forth, the strategy, the documents you're sharing, who's doing what, all of that is logged within the same matter. So that's a really, really powerful thing when it comes to collaboration in sort of this hybrid environment we're entering into. Whatever you can do to support your centralized ecosystem for your firm to help you stay organized, to help with collaboration, and to deliver that technology first client-centered experience to potential new clients and to existing clients, like that's where I think firms can really level up this year.
That's for sure. That's for sure. So we're throwing out a lot of really great tech suggestions, and I know sometimes those can be a blessing, but also really overwhelming. So, Nefra, technology is great. We would all agree on that. But what other ideas or tips do you have for lawyers, non-tech based, that can help bring them some success into their law firm?
Yeah, I am a process nerd. Every law firm that I've worked at, I have basically dug in and criticized and developed new processes and solutions. So this is like one of my favorite things to talk about, but having a process behind everything that you do is a critical factor in you being successful with any technology, whether that's Microsoft Word or legal practice management software or something like Smith AI. You can't be successful with those things unless you have a process behind it. Maddie's team can't answer your calls the way that you want them to without you having a process and a script and something that you work through. Workflows need to be in place, right?
That's a good example. Yeah.
Yeah. So making sure that you have those processes in place and revisit those processes often because things change. Like if you've got your voice over IP plugged into one phone and somebody got a new phone number, you need to make sure that that gets fixed. If there's ever a change in personnel, you need to make sure that things get reorganized or somebody's now responsible for the things that other person was. Like that's the stuff that you have to just keep on top of. And then encouraging policies around workplace flexibility, I think, is really important with the technologies that you have, right? So how are you communicating internally about people's working hours or how are you staffing that kind of availability window? And again, using a service like Smith AI to fill in some of those gaps where you think that people are going to be available, right? And making it so that people can work asynchronously. How is that going to be possible? Do you need to have meetings every single day, or is there like a centralized document or a source of truth like practice management software where somebody can go and see the last thing that was done in a file and then be able to pick up and complete their tasks, or being able to see within that platform that you've got somebody that has a backlog of tasks and you can have a one-on-one conversation with them about how you can support them to get them caught up. And our CEO actually wrote a book last year that is it's amazing how timely it's been throughout the last couple of months or so. But he wrote a book called The Client-Centered Law Firm. And it's all about like how you support a good experience with your firm without sacrificing that internal efficiency and supporting your own well-being and that of your staff. So it's a really great read. We offer the first chapter free. So as you head over to Clio.com and go to our resources section to get that legal trends report, you can also click on the client-centered section, and that will get you the first chapter of that book for free as well. Highly recommend it.
Me too. It's on my bookshelf. I've read it. So thank you, Nefra. Of course, if people have more questions, they can connect with you or others at Clio through your website, Clio.com, social media channels. Any other resources that our attendees should know about today, Nefra?
Yes, we do have the Clio Cloud Conference coming up this October. Passes are very inexpensive right now. They're $99 for 4 days of content. So if you're interested in attending and seeing the kinds of programming we put on as far as technology, innovation, inspiration, creating community, you can head over to cliocloudconference.com.
Fantastic. Yes, I need to grab my pass before those prices go up. So thank you, Nefra. All right, so let's segue from managing all of that work in the practice management software space to making sure you get paid. I know that's something that's been the forethought of a lot of attorneys and firms the past year is, I'm doing all this work. Am I going to get paid? Am I going to get paid enough? When am I going to get paid? It's hard to predict that. And talking about payments and money can be uncomfortable. I know it's my least favorite part of any client meeting. I'm always like, okay, now I got to bring up the money part. And I kind of like just acknowledge that it's awkward to some degree. But Amy Mann from LawPay, I'm hoping that you have some advice for us because this is an important topic for lawyers. So what would you say to lawyers who are a little uncomfortable talking about the money sometimes?
Absolutely. And it is an uncomfortable process. It's an uncomfortable topic, especially, a lot of us feel that way when it comes to it. And the unfortunate thing is there's no like sneak peek special trick I can give that's like, if you just say it this way, it's never awkward. But the good news is that when it comes to billing and collecting, for lawyers, this is the lifeblood of your practice. And so like anything else that you need to do, there are really easy ways to think about it and to approach it that turn it into more of a discipline and a practice rather than this kind of looming big bad that you don't want to engage with. And so we've really found, and one of my lawyers that works here with us at LawPay, her name is Jordan Turk, and fabulously, she always says, yeah, but you just do it, right? And if you just do it and build structure around it, it becomes more of a predictable part of your day, more of a predictable thing. And it stops carrying some of the weight and the heft that we find ourselves avoiding so often. So building structure around it and kind of giving yourself parameters saying, this isn't something I'm going to think about and stress about every single day, but on these 4 days of the month, I'm going to take a look at the invoices that I've sent out and I'm going to check and see which have been paid, which haven't been paid. This is the day I send everything out. And just build that structure into it. So like I said, it's not something that's hounding you every day. The days you have to work on billing, the days you have to follow up with clients, and it becomes a more routine part of your process, which makes it a little bit easier.
Yes, that's right. It gets easier with practice for sure. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes to legal payments specifically, what are some trends you're seeing in terms of lawyers meeting their customers' expectations with payment options?
Absolutely. So I think Maddie is the one who mentioned it earlier, with everything that's happened over the last year and the way that interacting with people has changed, the reality is that we're not going back to the way things were exactly before. And so even pre-pandemic, the writing was on the wall that people wanted convenient payment options, whether they were ordering something with Amazon one-click checkout or they were getting ready to pay their lawyer. Even as far back as in 2018, there's data that if you've got the deck open on slide 65, that 75% of people said they wanted to pay with a credit or a debit card, and that said 70% said that having multiple ways to pay a bill really increases their satisfaction. And so to what, Nefra was talking about with meeting your clients where they're at, and Maddie was speaking about it, and Mark mentioned about putting convenience first, payment is really another way to do that. And it's an expectation that legal clients are bringing to the table every single day. They are used to paying for things online. They are used to clicking to pay, and it's just that simple. And so, while we might not think of it that much because it's been a part of our process for, months, years, decades. The reality is for your client to get a paper invoice in the mail, to go and find a checkbook, to write that out, to find an envelope, find a stamp, take it to the post office, take it to their mailbox, that is a cumbersome process that you might find is actually slowing down your cash flow, not because your client doesn't have the money, not because your client doesn't want to pay you, but just because it's not convenient for them. And they're doing this everywhere else. And I always joke, it took me I work in payments, and it took me more than 120 days to pay an urgent care center semi-recently because I put the invoice on the counter and I meant to get to it, but life happened. I put a book on top of it, and then I put other mail on top of it. And then, something happened. And then all of a sudden I'm getting these you're 120 days overdue on this. And it was like a $20 check that I needed to write. I was good for $20, but it wasn't easy for me to do it. And if I had gotten that with a URL, or if I'd gotten an email that I could click and have paid right then, I would have done that immediately because I want that off my plate. And it's the same when it comes to legal payments. So that's one big trend we're seeing. The other big trend we're seeing is greater and greater adoption of people looking for payment plans and looking to pay on an installment basis for legal services. Sometimes this is a cash flow issue for the individual. Sometimes they might not have, the money on hand to make a $5,000 retainer payment right out of the gate, but they could pay you $500 every 2 weeks. And so, on slide 66, you can see here, 72% of consumers would prefer to pay their legal fees via a payment plan, but only 53% of law firms are offering that option right now. And so there's a huge opportunity to meet clients where they're at, to extend justice to a huge group of people who maybe wouldn't have been able to otherwise afford legal services. And on the back end, a lot of attorneys are finding that this is a really great solution for them too. A huge concern coming out of the pandemic and during the pandemic was, are my clients going to be able to pay me? And so there was a lot of concern around what cash flow is going to look like. And so by setting people up on payment plans, not only are you making life easier for them, but you're creating better consistency and predictability for your office. And you have more, it happens so much more reliably that you can more accurately forecast what cash flow is going to look like for your business. So really, it's a win-win all around, and absolutely one of the emerging trends we're seeing in the legal payment space.
That's for sure. And correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, but I believe that you can, once they submit one payment, you can then schedule that payment plan, right? So it's just automatic. It happens. You don't have to think about it.
Exactly. It just, that rolls in, and the flexibility of doing that within LawPay, or you can do it within Clio as well, is so versatile. You can schedule, payments to occur on different days for different amounts. You can do it until a certain day is reached or until a certain dollar amount is reached. So it really is as flexible as the parameters you need to set around it. And just like you said, it's convenient for you. It's convenient for your client. Once you guys agree on that and you set it up, nobody has to do anything, and you get paid and they get that to-do list checked off of their list.
Right. One less thing to worry about.
Exactly.
I will tell everyone, if you haven't looked at the slides yet, Amy's slides start around page 64, and she's got some really great data and numbers in here about these payment topics. If you're curious about this, check it out. And I'll also have to admit that my firm's had LawPay for years, and I'll have to admit I didn't use it extensively until the pandemic. And now I don't know why the heck I waited so long to figure it out. You can just email a link and people pay you right away. I know other attorneys that send it by text message. Their clients like to get a text and they click it and pay through their phone. So it is so easy to work with LawPay. If you haven't figured it out yet, invest a couple of hours. That's all you're going to need. I mean, for me, my account was already set up. I just needed to get my link and start sending it out to people. So there's my 2-minute endorsement. But
thank you,
Amy. What else would you like to add about payments and trends and other resources that attendees can look at?
Absolutely. I think that some of the overall things that I would recommend is, like you said, use credit cards and online payments to your advantage. If you haven't done it yet, it takes minutes to get set up. It takes minutes to get working with it. And it's really flexible. What we love, one of our founding goals at LawPay was, we don't want to reinvent the way you run your office. We want to give you a lot of opportunities to make payments work for the way you're already working. So experiment and find out what works with you. If it's it's payment plans, great. If it's like you said, Kristen, just copying and pasting a link into your email or onto invoices or into a text message, go that route. If you want to send someone an invoice for a preset amount that they just click to pay, great. But find out what works for you, because this is your practice. And like I said earlier, everything is about discipline and building routine. So find out how you can work payments into your predictable process. If you know that you send out case updates on a certain day, go ahead and attach a payment link to those updates if you've got a client who needs to either top off their retainer or make a payment on an outstanding invoice. Just go ahead and work that into your existing workflow. And overall, just be consistent. Don't be shy, be organized. So, bill clients regularly and predictably. Do it close to payday if you're concerned about people having money to pay your bill. Follow up on invoices early and regularly. If you pay, if you ask for payment and then you wait, like my urgent care center did, 120 days to follow up with them, you're going to get a lot of people who are like, oh man, this was absolutely slipped my mind and have not thought about it since the day I received that initial communication. A lot of times people aren't, failing to remit payment for any nefarious reasons. They just didn't get around to it. So follow up early, follow up regularly, and build payments into the way you're already running your business. And you'll be shocked at how much time it saves you in the long run and how much cash flow it drives in the immediacy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy, so much. This is really great information. I want to take a moment before I go into my segment to again invite you, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. If I start to see questions come in, I will keep my remarks brief so that we have plenty of time to get through those. If you have no questions, then you're going to just have to listen to me for more time. So I also, before I forget, want to share, just because we are kind of running up on time, that my topic that I want to talk to you about is considering different business models and also considering different staffing models for your law firm. Now, if this is a topic that's interesting for you, and if we don't get enough time today, we have a ton of resources on our website. I'm going to drop a link here to our resources page. Isn't that a creative page name, Attorney Resources? I'm the marketing genius behind that one. So check that out. We've got a lot of good stuff on there, including our ultimate guide to outsourcing. But one of the things I think that we as attorneys had a really unique opportunity the last year was to look at the way we're practicing law and to find ways to do law better. And it's been really exciting from my vantage to have a front row seat and talk with a lot of lawyers doing just that. I think a lot of lawyers are rethinking the interplay between their work, their personal life, the types of cases they want to work on, the tools they want to use. And this is a time to take advantage of that and reconsider different options. And one of the biggest, most compelling reasons why I think you should consider possibly changing up some of your business model is to help meet your clients' wishes. The number one thing I think clients want right now is certainty. I think that's the thing that we all want, is a little more certainty in life. What's the next 6 months going to be like? What's the next year going to be like? This is kind of the first time in as long as I can remember where we don't feel super certain about answering that question. And so any way that you can give them certainty, of course, you can't give them a promise or a guarantee about the outcome of their case if you're in litigation. But if there's other things you can do to make the working relationship more understandable and predictable, that's going to be a win. So from my perspective, one of the biggest ways you can do that is going to be through your billing model. And I've got a couple of charts on this starting around slide 80. The slide 80 is actually from the Clio Legal Trends report. And it says this part of their report was looking at what factors make a lawyer more hireable according to consumers. And some of those factors that made a lawyer more hireable included offering payment plans, offering fixed fees, offering unbundled services. And this goes directly into my topic that I wanted to hit on. First off is that, if you've ever daydreamed or longed to ditch the billable hour, it's a really good time to do that. I've seen more and more lawyers take the leap to give it a try, to leave hourly billing, which I don't know any clients that like it. I know very few lawyers that like it, other than they do typically make a lot of money with it. But more and more practice areas are moving to implement flat fee billing models, to offer a minimum fee type situation. Unbundled services is really growing in popularity, both with lawyers and clients. And last but not least, subscription. So looking at those real quick, when you're looking at a flat fee type business model, arguably that could work in a number of practice areas. We see it a lot in my world of estate planning. We see it in certain types of corporate and business transactional work. I also see it a lot in immigration, but really, I think there's an unlimited use for a flat fee billing model. You just have to get creative and you have to be brave enough to try it out. And, my perspective on this is if you're going to try a flat fee billing model, which by the way, clients love, then you're going to win the majority of them. You need to set a flat fee price that you feel like is a win for the majority of them and accept the fact that you're going to have a few every year where you probably didn't come out on top of that one because it was a difficult client. And that's just part of the deal. But again, offering that can be a way to differentiate yourself and to give your client more certainty in working with you when they know exactly what they're going to pay. Related to that, a hybrid of that is a minimum fee. And so I see that a lot in the criminal or DUI world, where a lot of times skilled criminal attorneys, defense attorneys can get really fantastic results quickly. And so they will charge a minimum fee. So a flat fee out the gate with the caveat that if the case progresses through litigation, maybe beyond a certain threshold of hours or a certain point in the case, that then it switches to an hourly billing model. So that's another one to think about. I've gotten really to know a lot more about unbundled services. Unbundled services, if you're not familiar, is a way that a client can engage an attorney for a limited portion of work. And, fortunately or unfortunately, there's still a lot of clients out there who are DIYers and they want to do a lot of this legal work themselves. And it makes all of us cringe, I know, but they're going to do that. But with unbundled, this is an option and a way for them to come in and retain you, generally on a flat fee, for a very limited amount of work. And that scope of work is clearly defined. Again, this is another way to make your services accessible and to give people certainty about what they're going to pay for a very specific piece of work. So that's another one to consider. And, I used to have this perception that unbundled services must mean that these poor attorneys were getting paid peanuts. But I know so many attorneys who are actually really seeing a lot of success with offering this business model, and they like it. They don't get entrenched with, litigation that goes on for years and years. Now, last but certainly not least, subscription. A lot of practice areas are going to a subscription-based model. Again, this gives clients certainty when it comes to budgeting, monthly expenses. I see this a lot in terms of attorneys that work with business clients, especially small business clients, people that are working with creatives, online entrepreneurs, and also people that work with nonprofits. This is a way to, again, make legal services more accessible for those types of clients in hopes that they'll come to you more often, that they'll come to you earlier in the process to maybe avoid some bigger problems down the road because they have access on an ongoing basis to get your input on issues, to get your help, but they also can budget and pay for those in a way that's manageable for them. Okay, now I know that we're kind of coming up on time, but the flip side to this is, let's say you take the leap to try out some new business models in your firm, specifically some new pricing models, and you market those appropriately. Chances are they're going to work, and you're going to have a whole new onslaught of attorneys calling you up and knocking on your door and wanting your help. And that can be a little nerve-wracking for a lot of attorneys. So what am I going to do when I'm suddenly overwhelmed with work? And so that's something you have to think about. And the good news is that there's a lot of alternative staffing options for firms that in some ways are new, in some ways they aren't. When you're looking at any role in when you're looking at any role in a law firm, the kind of amazing thing is that these days there's a virtual outsourced option for pretty much any role, whether you need someone to answer the phones, you need someone to help with marketing, you need someone to do your bills or do training for new employees, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, my world of freelance lawyers, there's an incredible network of really talented freelance lawyers out there to help you, whether you need help with one document or you need ongoing recurring help every month. And so this is another way that you can consider to get the help you need, but to keep your overhead low, because that is one thing we don't want to do, is drive up your overhead when we are still in kind of a time period of a lot of uncertainty. So think carefully about your different hiring options. And again, I want to encourage you to be flexible. Try out some of these alternative options that maybe seemed a little intimidating a year ago, but because we've now gotten so much more accustomed to working virtually with other people, they are much more easy to tap into to get the help you need when you need it. And, you really deserve that for yourself, so you don't get to the point of total burnout, and you also deserve it for your clients to make sure that they're getting the results they need. So again, we have a lot more information on the benefits of outsourcing. We've got some great, examples to show you the economics of that, about how you can still make a lot of money with outsourcing, because that is one common misperception. Some people view outsourcing as an expense, when in reality, you are allowed to bill the work of a freelance lawyer to your client at a reasonable market rate. So again, a great way to get the help you need, but also to bring more revenue into your firm so that you will not only survive, but thrive in this year and beyond. So with that being said, I want to wrap up my comments. Thank you, Omaha Bar, for letting me come back home in a virtual way for this help. And definitely for those of you who want to stick around, if you have questions, if you want to come on and ask those, our team is happy to address those. Or again, if you want to reach out one-on-one, the last page of that handout does include our contact information. Dave?
Thank you so much for just a wealth of information today. This was, I'm running out of notebook space with all the ideas. and the slide deck, for those who didn't see it at the beginning of the chat, I'm gonna send it out to everybody so everybody can have those slides. Wow, just great information, everybody. Thank you so much for that. I think if anybody just takes away one or two of the ideas that we're here today, they can work better, not harder, which is the goal for all of us, right? And so thank you. I do have to show my Chihuahua, because Amy has her Chihuahua with her at work, and I just wanted to connect on our Chihuahuas here today.
Come on, Amy. Yeah.
Oh, they could say hello. They could be Zoom friends there, right? Thank you, everybody, for being on. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Just everyone saying thank you, and have to agree with that. Thank you so much for your time. And I know during the chat here, I've been sending it for some of the things that you've been talking about. I think pretty much every single website, if you want more information, you can go to the website of each of your companies and get more information by getting on a subscription for email and marketing, everything like that. So that's great. Thank you. And I'll let everybody get off. If anybody wants to stay on and say hello to Hector, they can certainly do that.
Party for the after party crew.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Amy, I've got Harvey here too.
Oh, there's Harvey.
The one day my dog's in daycare. He's not a Chihuahua.
Both little dogs are both so cute. I had no idea we had little puppies listening to us all.
I know, they're so well behaved.
Yes, they are.
Mona's a borderline lawyer at this point in time. She's ready. No account. She's ready.
She's too well behaved to be a lawyer.
If anyone wants a really great Facebook group that's super hilarious, Brittany Lawyers, it's like all the dogs that are asking for representation, all the ways that they've been warned.
Love it.
It's very funny. Very, very funny.
Lawyers. That's great.
Maybe there's one for Chihuahuas too. I'm sure there is.
I have to say, Instagram.
My God, Dave, you've got one too?
Yeah. This is Hector. He's the unofficial mascot of the Omaha
Oh
So
my
Bar.
three of you had your dogs there.
Yeah, he's our fur baby. Yeah.
Mona's our law pay. He's our law pay mascot, and that's actually the reason she's here. We're having an event at the office today, and multiple people from our team was like, "Well, is Mona coming?" And I'm like, "Yes, but and also me. I will also." I don't care. I just want Mona.
Gets your ego in check when you take your dog around. Yeah.
I know who the queen is. I'm just her chauffeur.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you. I'm not
Thanks,
seeing
Dave.
any questions here, so I'm gonna close the Zoom. But again, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having us,
Thanks
Dave.
for having us.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Thank
See
you,
you later.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.